Hello again. Welcome to my channel. Joshua Helms here. And I want to talk to you some more about how I'm using my effects pedals. A little bit of experimenting I've been doing with stacked compression, EQ, and stacking overdrive. So I want to get into talking about that. I'm going to start this video just kind of explain to you what I've got on the board. It's probably going to take longer than I want it to in one video, so it might end up being 2 or 3 parts. But if you watched any of my videos before, you might have saw one about the Hillbilly pedal board. Well, I'm still using it, still working great, except I have made one minor adjustment. I got rid of the zip ties and I've gone to the step right below Velcro command strips. Hey, it does the job, gets it done. So let me explain to you what we're doing here today. Got my 50th anniversary Strat. This is my favorite guitar. Going into the Boss Katana. Sorry for all the movement. I'm trying not to move too much. Just acquired this about a year ago or less, and it's been a phenomenal amp. If you know anything about them, I'll just show you real quick just how I'm set. This is how I would typically, that's about how I set my EQs. I like to actually cut the mids. I know people talk about boosting the mids. I'm going to explain to you why I cut mids and maybe just gain a little bit of treble. The cool thing about the Boss Katana is you got several different amp settings. I'm on clean. The acoustic setting is phenomenal for an acoustic guitar. I use it that way. Then you got the crunch settings, lead, everything else. But we're just going to stay clean. All I'm using is just reverb. And then this is another cool feature. You can bump it down to 5 watts. I'm on 50 watts right now. 100 watts will blow you away. And I'd like to, maybe not in this video, but maybe in the next one, I'll explain to you, how 5 watts can make an entirely different sound, which is something I just kind of recently discovered. So let's just get into this real quick. Overall, we're just focusing on this right here. This is the pedal board, the old Hillbilly pedal board made out of an old TV tray. And I used to have them zip tied there, but that worked until I had to change stuff out, and then it got kind of annoying. So they're stuck on there with command strips, and then I'm going to upgrade to some Velcro. We'll do it right. So this is extra. Normally I wouldn't use all this, but this is how I set up my basement. So I've got my, I know everything's blurry. I apologize for that. Tube amp modeler. This is a Behringer. Gets everything from kind of a Fenderish type sound to a Marshall type sound. And it's not, of course, going to be the real thing. The other extra I've got over here is I've got my wah-wah pedal plugged in. My Behringer Super Fuzz. Really cool pedal, except it doesn't do good when you're playing rhythm. It's more for like really extreme fuzz. Then I've just got my looper so that I can show how you would stack tones on top of other tones. Okay, so starting with the first thing going into the signal chain after we've got the extra here, the fuzz. Usually want to put fuzz first. The only thing I would do differently, I just don't feel like moving around, is the wah-wah actually needs to go after the other fuzz that I've got here. Fuzz doesn't like to receive wah very well. So let's ignore this. We're going straight here. Normally, if I were to pick up this board and plug in somewhere else, this is how it would be. I've got it set as a mid boost. So I've got the, I think 400K to 800K boosted a little bit. I couldn't tell you what all that stuff means. A little bit of a treble boost and just a slight volume boost. An EQ really is all you need. If you really wanted to simplify, you can actually use that as an overdrive. It does a really great job just boosting. A lot of people use it just as a boost. Okay, this is a Donner compressor. It's got 2 modes on it. One is kind of pulls in the trebles. That's how I've got it set right now. My Azure Fuzz, which is actually my favorite one that I've got on this. It's like a 60s era, late 60s, 70s era type fuzz, which is what I really go for. The one that's worth any money on my board, this is the DS1, and I didn't even pay a whole lot for it. I got it for a good price. I don't pay a lot of money. I buy stuff cheap. And then going into the blues overdrive, Behringer. Most everything on here is Behringer. The Tom's line distortion. It's pretty cool, but I'm trying to convince myself that I like it, so that's why I've got it on here. And when you use it as a high gain distortion, it's pretty cool. Going into a chorus, an octaver that I'm not sure is working right. I think it's actually got some kind of glitch in it, or maybe it's just the way I'm using it. Digital reverb, several different settings on it. I've just kind of got it set to one particular setting. My compressor. So yeah, I've got 2 compressors, and I'll show you what that does. And I'm going into a multi-reverb. And the main reason I use that reverb, here's just to back up so you can see everything I've got, is if I'm running into an amp that the reverb doesn't work or doesn't have reverb for whatever reason, which this Marshall right here sounds awesome, but when I got it for free. I mean, who's not going to take a free Marshall? And it had some issues to begin with. The reverb, the effects loop's not working right. There's a couple things. Got a tube going out too, but it still sounds great. So if you're running into that Marshall and you want some reverb, well, I've got some reverb right here. So that's what we're looking at, okay? So, and just real quick, I'm just going to kind of show you what each effect sounds like. And then we're going to move into another video where I show you how you would use these. Apologize for all the camera movement. How you would use these in more of a practical setting. Okay, so here's my clean tone on the Boss. To me, it's a very usable tone. If I didn't have any pedals, anything else, I would still use the Boss. I actually love the way it sounds, and I've spent enough time playing Southern gospel, old country, where you really don't need the effects. I want to learn personally how to be a better guitar player than an effects player. So my goal, the way that I start out trying to get a good tone, is I start with the amp. And if you can't get a good sound out of the amp, then you might just have to go to a different amp. And there are some ways, and I've kind of shown you can use some effects maybe to kind of help a bad amp sound, but it's really got to start with the amp. So for me, it's got to be a sound that I can use in anything, even if the song picks up and is more intense, even will that clean tone still work? And that's my goal. So that's a pretty basic tone, but let's say you needed some mids. As I said before, I actually cut my mids, and the reason I do that, I'll show you on my church pedal board, I'll do another video, is because if you're playing in a band setting and you're wanting to blend, in a church situation, I'm trying to blend as opposed to stick out in the mix. So the mids can actually be really harsh. So I use a tone. I'm letting the trebles stick through. But it's really good for rhythm because I'm usually playing kind of a combination of rhythm and lead. So, you know. Okay, but there are the times that you need a little bit of mids. me, it's too harsh. A lot of people like that sound, and you do need that sound when you're needing to cut through a mix. So there might be times where I'm actually playing like this, maybe for rhythm. Maybe I need to kick through and get above that. Country setting as well, a lot of country guitar tends to be real heavy in the mids, and that's kind of on purpose. It's to thicken up the sound so it can sit on top of the music as opposed to blending into it. But still, most of the time, I'm going to use it without the mids. Maybe I just want to play a lead line. Alright, so that's where your mids come in. So that I'm using that really as a mid boost. Works great for clean and distorted as well. And you might notice if you really dig into it, I'm going to turn the volume down just a little bit. With the mids up, it wants to break up a little bit too. So you can use it as a way to kind of get on the edge of breakup, or it can actually overdrive pretty good if you really slam all your faders just all the way full open. And I would recommend experimenting with that as opposed to several different types of overdrive. I think that's a good way to start. So moving on, there's the EQ. So another thing I like to use is a compressor. This particular one, you can get a real hard pop out of it if you want to, but I've kind of got it set to where it's more just a smooth sound, but it does pop a little bit. That's without it. Compression can be explained as a boost for your clean. Kind of tries to overdrive a little bit there too. So compression can be another tool. Even if you're already using overdrive, it can help just push it just a little bit more, or take into account that compression can also kill your volume as well. It can take a clean signal and distort it. It can take a distorted signal and distort it even more, but one thing that it can also do is really kill your volume when you really compress hard. The way I've got it set, I'm actually kind of boosting my volume. here. Yeah, you can use that for country if you wanted to. I like it for more just... And I'm staying mostly on my neck pickup as well. That's typically where I tend to play, or middle pickup. Okay, let's move on from there. My favorite one on the board, here we go. If I had to just use one, I'd probably just stick with this fuzz. Yeah, very late 60s, almost fuzz face. I would say it's probably more like a tone bender. I don't know, it's unique, it's got its own sound. And I've only got the fuzz turned halfway up. If you really turn it all the way up, I'll do it once. Yeah, I'm a blues guy, so I really go for that fuzz sound. And Jimi Hendrix kind of sound, and it will clean up a little bit if you roll your volume down. But not as much as an actual fuzz pedal will. You know, like a fuzz face or whatever. Not the kind of cleanup that people really talk about a fuzz being able to do, but that's, you know, that's fuzz. It gives you that they can go everything from that really what they call a sputtery sound. I could turn that fuzz way down. It just sounds like a pretty cool overdrive. Let me show you one thing real quick because I need to move on to the other pedals. Let's click this back on. So here's your really heavy. But let's say you don't like all that, let's just call it sputteriness. There's so many different words to describe tones. Click on the compressor real quick and you're going to hear something different. Clean it up a little bit with a compressor. Fuzz is really bad about kind of scooping the mids, and in a mix it can get lost real easy. So do this and put the mids back in. Do both. Put the compressor on too. Very much like a fuzz face going into an already high gain amp. To me, I don't know. People that do this more than I do, maybe they could explain it better, but it's pretty cool. So yeah, you don't have to settle just for the tone that comes with the pedal. There's ways to actually really modify that without having to take it apart and redo it. So let's move on a little bit. I'm going to go through these a little quicker, then we'll get on to another video talking a little bit more how to use this. So here's my DS1. I've got it set for actually a pretty high gain. So here's... But it's pretty responsive to the way you play as well, so it doesn't always have to be real screaming. Roll your tone down. Right? Put it back on. Dig into it hard and you get play more soft. Okay, so I use that mostly for solo, not as much for chords. And it's a hard one to dial in because it's really bright. You can't see it from the camera angle, but I've actually got my tone set way over to this side. My volume's about halfway, and my gain is not quite all the way. If you go all the way, you're basically turning it into a fuzz pedal. So that's what I'm doing with the DS1. That's basically my high gain distortion. I need to not talk about it too much so that I can move it to the next video. So I'll just tell you I've got basically 2 levels of low gain. So I've got, and don't be fooled, the blues driver can actually go extremely high gain, but I've got it set pretty low. So here's my blues driver. Here's clean. Here's just a light crunch. All of a sudden, do some compression. Same thing happens. Your gain really goes up. Yeah, pretty cool. That's why I set it so low. I just want it to crunch a little bit, and then I can alter it from there. This is actually a distortion pedal. I've actually got the gain as low as it'll go, and it's still is a little bit harder than I want it to be. I've had to adjust the tone to try to match the blues driver. Tone all the way down, and it's higher than I want it to be, or it's brighter than I want it to be, but it's not terrible. Okay, just a little bit of dirt on this one. Just got a little bite to it. It's definitely more overdriven. I'd call it more gainy, not necessarily overdriven, because I feel like it doesn't gain in the respect of the thickening the sound. It just kind of puts more dirt on it, and to me, there's a difference in gain, because when I want more gain, I don't always want more dirt. Sometimes I just want to make the sound bigger. But you can do that here. Click on my blues driver with it. Tom's line alone. Add just a little bit to it and just click that back on. I can do it in the reverse. Maybe I want to start out with a really low crunch. really scream. I don't always go for that intense of a sound. It's not so much the idea of having more dirt, but I think it's that brightness sometimes can be a little bit too much to me. And then it can kind of clear up, add that compression to it a little bit. I might be wrong. I've never really used a tube screamer, but I feel like it's sort of doing what a tube screamer does, boosting the mids, adding a little bit of gain. Yeah, it can actually be pretty brutal on the ears, so I don't go to that extreme most of the time. That's why I like to start low gain, which I'll talk about that in the next video. So that's what's coming up in the next video, talking about how to stack from a really low gain, add a little gain to it, instead of just going from, you know, one extreme to the other. So let's move on. So those are my gain pedals. My chorus I've got set to just a real mild. I try to cut out a lot of the depth to it. To me, that's where it starts sounding really kind of unusable. Okay, so there's my chorus. The octave is one that I don't use as much, but it's kind of cool to have. I feel like it sounds better on clean than anything, but put a little fuzz to it, that's pretty cool. Not to be confused with octafuzz, which is a different sound, which is closer to, I don't know if you can see my feet clicking on the super fuzz over here. Super fuzz is cool, but you can't really do chords with it. Like, and that's still not quite an actual octafuzz, but it gets some kind of weird harmonics. This is just fuzz with octave added to it. Okay, but it's still kind of a cool sound. So where would I use? So far, the only place that I've found the octave to do me any good is if I'm using it to lay down a track and I need kind of a bass sound to go with it. So I would do it kind of like. Yeah, my looper didn't work, but you get the idea. So I might make a loop out of that, you know, play over that. It's kind of cool to have. I'm not real sure if that's one I'm going to keep, but as far as everything else you're seeing, that's pretty much the way I'm going to have it from here on out. Here's my delay. I've got it set to just kind of an analog sounding delay. I don't use a lot of the dotted eights. I personally like to either set it to where it's just a little bit slower than slapback, or to set it long enough that the delays don't muddy up what I'm already playing, because the way I'm hardly ever playing in a situation where my delays are matching the tempo of the song. So I try to set it where it's just kind of in between. Another trick too, by the way, your modulation effects can also really get affected by clicking on some EQ. the same thing. Okay, moving on from there. Here's my other compressor. So it's not a whole lot different than the first one, but I've got it set just a little bit more heavy compression. Kind of a cool sound. So I use that one for more of an effect. You can put them both on. Plus you get a little bit of overdrive with that. Okay. So just leaving the one on. Goes after the overdrives, it kind of serves as a volume booster. So before the compression, after compression. Okay, so that's basically not a whole lot to talk about with the compression, but that's the idea. That's why I've got they do two different things, whether they go before overdrive or after overdrive. So I've got one set on each side of the overdrive for that purpose. So it's kind of an experiment to see how it really works whether it's worth having both of them, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Then my reverb, I've got set right now to plate reverb. Most situations I don't use that much reverb because I've got the reverb through the amp. I prefer just a good old-fashioned spring reverb. But it is cool when you're doing kind of a volume fade-in kind of thing. Or even not doing the fades, but just so that's what I've got that set for. And then the only other thing I'll add to this, so you got all those effects. Now I can totally change everything just by clicking on. I've got this set, or at least according to what it says, is like a tube or like a tweed Fender kind of sound. I don't know. It's similar. So here's without it. Here's with it. I like the sound. To me, it's a very warm sound. In fact, a lot of times I like to just leave it there. Not even turn it off. Just turn it on and leave it there. Need some mids, leave it there. It's already kind of bright, so you got to be careful. And then, of course, you can go through the whole thing I just did again, all over again. It will totally change the sound of your overdrive. I'll only show you that real quick. So here, let's just use the real light overdrive. That's without the tube modeler on. Turn the tube modeler on. So the point being, you can get everything set exactly where you like it, find that perfect tone, plug into a whole different amp, and everything changes. So it's really difficult to find that perfect sound. So this is what I want to do instead, is to learn to, first of all, I've got the options. I can, they're there if I need them, but I also want to learn to just, make the best of what I have. It may not be the sound I'm going for in my mind, but how can I use that tone the way it's given to me? And sometimes you got some really unusable sounds. I click the compressor and the EQ together, and in the right setting it can be good. Sometimes it's too harsh. I prefer very warm sounds. Either kind of a mid-scoop clean that I use a lot, and this would still be kind of mid-scoop, but a little bit brighter. If I need a little bit of mids, that's fine. That's my basic. That's where I start. Everything else is just adding to it. So, that being said, this is the new Hillbilly pedal board with a slight upgrade. So until next time, we're going to talk about how we're actually going to stack some of these pedals together and use them. And we'll talk to you later. We'll see you.